I'm Terry Meisner. If you came to, how many folks came to the PPE class? Did you come to the PPE class?
I didn't, I missed that one.
You did? You were the PPE class, okay. So this is not a repeat of that. There are a couple of items that do involve PPE, but I don't go into the depth that I did for the personal protective equipment, the PPE class. So I'm sure we'll repeat that class at some point in the future. But that goes into a lot more depth of how do you wear this stuff correctly. Right, during this class, we just make you aware of it, but we don't teach you how to put it on, take it off, things like that. So basically, this one talks a little bit about how to do a risk, threat, vulnerability analysis for yourself and wherever you live. We define the difference between shelter in place and the bug-in. Talk about some of the requirements that you may want to have at your, whatever your shelter is, whether that's your workplace, whether that's at home, your apartment, whatever. And then talk about some of the specific threats that might be out there, especially some growing threats. And then how do you prepare for some of the all hazards things out there? For those who don't know me, my background is I'm an emergency manager. I'm semi-retired, have done that for about 35 years, time with the Air Force and Department of Energy, and now I'm an independent consultant, and I work for different groups. So, okay, one of the things that you really have to start with is some type of an analysis of what could be your potential threats that are out there, and we'll show you a basic chart that you can use. Most important thing here is look at a reasonable case. For example, is a pandemic reasonable? Yes, a pandemic is quite reasonable, that you could end up with having a pandemic, which is some type of a disease or something that usually starts overseas and gets here to the US and then spreads rapidly. And so we will talk about that under biological threats. So that's reasonable. Is a zombie apocalypse reasonable? Depends on which movies you watch, I guess. But generally speaking, I would not consider a zombie apocalypse to be a reasonable threat, at least not here in Cedar City. Maybe Los Angeles, but probably not here. So plan for those type of reasonable things. Pandemic is reasonable. Be realistic, not paranoid. The Chinese are not going to invade Cedar City at any time. So I don't think we have to worry too much about that. Could they have a conflict in North Korea? Certainly, and that could occur within about 48 hours. So that could become a very interesting case over there at this point. So just be realistic, look at the threats. Does the U.S. news media always tell us the truth? No. Point blank, no, they don't. So use a wide variety of sources out there to get your intelligence, if you will. And that's generally referred to as open source intelligence. For example, I use the BBC. I go up to the BBC and just see what are they reporting, which can be very much different than what is the U.S. news media. I use a website called the Drudge Report. I'm sure you're familiar with the Drudge Report. So if you're looking for interesting websites that are not way off there in tinfoil land, the Drudge Report is not a bad one. He's an aggregator of news. He doesn't generally produce his own news. He aggregates, pulls in news from all over the world, and then he puts it up. And so that's an interesting spot. It has different viewpoints than just straight U.S. viewpoints. So it's pretty good. So just take a look at what your threats are. Sir?
Very locally, these radios getting first-hand knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And that become part of that is the ability, and we recommend that, is to have at least a scanner so that you can hear, if you live in Cedar City, listen to Cedar City PD. We're still fortunate that in this area they do not use encrypted radios. Like if you go down to Las Vegas and stuff, everybody's pretty much gone to 800, 900, and they use encrypted radios on some of the channels, sometimes all the channels, all the freaks. So these work well to gather local intelligence, fire department, EMS, police, sheriff's department. You can all pretty well hear them with a very inexpensive radio scanner. Inexpensive ones start, $35, $40, and they just go up from there. So it's a way to keep track, like you said, of what's going on. Why are there multiple fires? Why is the fire department going all over the place? How is the big fire on the mountain going? And you can hear BLM and the rest of the folks, things like that. So just make your plan, your analysis, fairly simple, and we're going to give you just a basic idea on how to make one of those. So what you're doing is you assess vulnerabilities, what could go wrong, and then understand, for example, if I lose power at my house, then how do I heat my home? And many people will say, well, I have a gas furnace. Okay, you understand that you have to have electricity to make that gas furnace work. because it has a blower, it has an interface, it has all kinds of stuff. Unless it's a standalone type of heater that requires no electrical. But if it's a normal HVAC system in most homes, even though it may be a gas furnace or a propane furnace, same thing, if it has a blower in it, guess what? The furnace won't ignite unless it has power. So that's all you're doing is looking at what's vulnerable. Could I lose the power grid? Okay, I mean, where I live kind of far out. You can lose the power grid, and we do frequently, and it's out for 2 or 3 days. Heavy snow, summer storm, things like that. We're kind of at the end of the power line, and so they're not real quick to fix us. Whereas if you lose the power in Cedar City, it might be out 8, 10, 12 hours, who knows. But just understand what's going to happen if you do lose something like that. And that's all we're trying to do is mitigation is how can I help either prevent this, or if it does occur, what do I need to do? And it might be, oh, I should maybe buy a generator, and then either I know how to hook it up, or I hire an electrician to hook it up. I don't follow some of the advice on the internet as to how to backfeed my system, because you'll do a lot of damage that way. So if you don't know how to use generators and how to hook them up, hire an electrician, pay the $200, whatever it is, to get them to do the job correctly so you don't hurt somebody. Okay, ultimately, you're trying to answer a couple of questions. What do we need to prepare for? And I list a couple of things that are potentials in this area. If I lived in Los Angeles, they might be different things that I would be preparing for. What resources do I need? And some of those resources could include just writing them down. That's called planning. Just thinking about it, discussing it with my wife, my family, whoever lives with me at my house, my farm, whatever it is. Maybe I need some additional training. Maybe that training is how do I do gardening? How do I run a generator? Or maybe I need improvements on firearms. And then what do I need to equip myself with? Do I need to buy a generator? Do I need to do something else? So those are the things you look for when it says resources. It's generally planning, training, equipment. What actions can I mitigate or reduce that threat? So that's always a possibility, is think about how can I make this work even if the water goes out? Oh, I can stockpile water. 5-gallon containers, 55-gallon containers, whatever it is. So risks, threats, hazards, what could go wrong? The probability, how likely is that event to occur? Is it very likely, for example, a power outage? Where I live, power outage is very likely to occur because of storms and the power system is not 100% reliable. Impact, I have to look and see how is that going to affect me? Will I be without lights? Will I be without what for that period of time? And then mitigation, how can I help make this thing work? How can I reduce what's going to happen? Okay. An interesting slide from, I do a lot of presentations, so I have pulled slides from other presentations that I have. Just showing you, this is a potential, this line is the potential impact, and this is the probability. So down here would be very low probability, very high impact. For example, a nuclear weapon detonating in Cedar City. Extremely low probability, but a very high impact. If I were to say Los Angeles or New York or Washington, D.C., I would push this out a little bit higher and say a little higher probability, still a very, very significant impact. The same thing, an improvised nuclear device, not a full-size weapon, a smaller weapon that a terrorist would use, still very high impact, probability kind of go out there. Use of radioactive material, they could still use it. That would be what's called an RDD. We'll talk about that, radiation dispersal device. The use of chemical agents or toxic industrial type of things, higher probability. This would be the classic tank car that's sitting on a rail siding where they decide to blow up a portion of the tank car, the pipes, and it releases whatever toxic chemical is in there. Fairly easy to do. If you can make a pipe bomb, you could do that. And if you've ever seen the rail sidings, when you go down to Vegas, Chicago, any big city, they're right in the center of the city somewhere. And then the use of a biological agent. Higher probability, higher impact, because you could potentially get it to spread if you know what you're doing. So we're looking at all the different threats that are out there, and I have a couple of different categories. Natural events. Could we have earthquakes here? Sure, we do have earthquakes on occasion. Thankfully, they've been small, but eventually, they could have a big one. They talk about that you could have a fairly good one here. Tornadoes, where I live, wildfires, volcanoes. Oh, I hope not. Hope we don't see volcanoes. But if you had a big one go up, what would that have an impact on us? Probably. Accidents. Do we have an interstate around us that transports hazardous materials? Oh, I-15. Every day, hazmat goes up and down. We have rail. A lot of hazmat goes by rail. What if they had an accident involving hazardous materials? they would probably give an order to shelter in place for certain areas depending on where the winds were. So this could have an effect. International acts, terrorism, war. Could be cyber attacks. Can they shut the power grid down with cyber? I'm sure they're working on it. If they can't do it right today, they could probably do it tomorrow. Terrorists could do different things. You could have chem, bio, different things like that could occur. So you just kind of have to look at what are my threats that are out there. So you identify what's very, very important, otherwise known as mission critical. So in your case, you're a mom, a dad, whatever, you want to provide shelter, food, water to your family. That's very, very important to you. So those are your mission critical things. So you have to decide, I do my planning to support providing shelter, food, and water to my family. When you plan for contingencies, basically this is a role we use in the military, and I was a military responder, incident commander, hazmat type of person, and so if we needed 2 generators on site, we brought 4, because the saying is 1 is none. 1 generator is not going to cut it. So you always double what you think, what you know you need, so that if 1 fails, you still have a backup. So keep that in mind, is that when you're doing planning, if that requirement is high, I really need power to my house, I really need water, then don't just plan on 1, plan on acquiring 2. And that's the way that you want to plan it. So if you have to have 1, then you need to have 2 available, even if you say, well, I'm going to buy 1 now, 6 months later I'm going to buy another one. Maybe they're exactly the same, maybe they're slightly different, they use different fuel, one might use gasoline. I like propane. Propane works really well, and it doesn't have a shelf life like gasoline or diesel. Okay, PACE is what you use for a truly mission critical function. It's called primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. I'll give you an example. Heating your home. You have a primary system to heat your home, and that's called an HVAC system. You turn the thermostat on, and the air conditioner comes on, the heat comes on, works great. What is your alternate for that? Oh, I have a wood stove. Great, that's a great alternate. Okay, what if the chimney gets blocked? What if something goes wrong with that? What is the contingency? I have a small propane heater that I could bring inside and use. Okay, and then what would I do in an emergency? So you're looking at 4 different ways to accomplish a single goal, heat the home. How am I going to do that? Do you have to have all 4? No, but you should at least have at least 1 or 2 of them in there to say, here's my primary, and now what do I do if I lose power? What's my alternate? Oh, that doesn't need any power. And then what do I have for contingency? I have a wood stove, I have a whatever you have. So just things as a planner, and that's what I've done most of my life, is plan emergencies and contingencies. What do I need to be thinking about? Because the worst thing you do is if you don't have a plan, what happens? You panic. And people say, now what do I do? You will panic. So if you have planned for it, you're going to do much better. Okay, so these are some of the risks that are around here: earthquakes, floods. And what's the risk? What could happen? Loss of power if you have an earthquake, certainly. Structures could collapse. Could you lose portions of I-15 in an earthquake? Sure, absolutely. So maybe you couldn't go north or you couldn't go south. I mean, we saw a loss of I-15 due to flooding, about 2 years ago? And then they put everybody on 56, and there's huge amounts of truck traffic going on 56 to go all the way through Caliente and go down on 93. And that was a fairly simple, it was a flash flood that occurred is what happened. So that's something as simple as that, delayed things for quite a bit of time. So those are accidents, those are our natural events, accidents, and intentional. So you look at what if we get into something where somebody tries to disrupt our power system, which they could do just using cyber, no physical attack, just cyber. And you have a loss of power. And this is what a lot of people don't know is, you say, well, as long as I can still get gas in my car, then I'm okay. Realizing that when you go to the gas pump and you put your credit debit card in there, it actually goes over the internet back to their little computer to verify the credit card is not stolen and that it's valid, and it turns the pump on. And if there's no internet, that gas pump doesn't come on. And that's the way the vast majority of those gas pumps are now. If it has one of those things, and you can say, well, just turn the pump on. The guy says, I can't turn the pump on. The pump is controlled over the internet by a computer, which probably isn't in that Maverick station, it's probably somewhere else. So keep that in mind, is they have no ability to do some of that stuff if they lose internet or power or both. They can't run the pumps. So that could be a problem. Oops, wrong one. This is just a basic risk assessment form, and I'll just show you how it works. Is you identify your risk, and certainly you could have more risks, you could have less. And then on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 being high, you say, for example, where I live, wildfire. I live where we have wildfires. So it's a fairly, it's a risk. How probable? 4. What's the impact if we have a big wildfire? I could lose everything at my house. So what do I need to do to mitigate that? I have some firefighting tools. I have some hoses. I have some water. I have some pumps, things like that. So that's a very basic risk assessment that says I've identified a significant risk. Severe storms, and you could just go through and then fill the rest of them out. Loss of power, how probable? It occurs every year. The impact, it's an inconvenience. I can live without it, but it's an inconvenience. And so what do I have? I have a generator. I have 2 generators to make sure that everything works. Okay? And so then you come down and you look and you say, what's the risk? A nuclear attack. In the U.S., potential, not very high here. Our nuclear attack would occur, if it was a terrorist attack, probably Los Angeles or Las Vegas are much more probable. What's the impact? Even if it's down there, could still be very, very significant impact here in the U.S. You would have a disruption of supply services. You would have all kinds of other things. How would I mitigate that? I have radiation meters. I mean, I've been teaching rad courses for 30 years, so I have my own rad meters. That's the thing with radiation is you don't know what you don't know until you have a meter. Because unlike what you see on the Homer Simpson stuff, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't feel it. You don't know until you've already received a lot. Then you start to get sick. And then KI is the medication, and I think you guys have KI here. We'll talk about it. If you have kids or grandkids, this is what you want to make sure you have. Just to give you an example, after Fukushima in Japan, when they had that incident with a nuclear reactor, they estimated they needed about 20 million doses of KI to protect the children in Japan from where the wind was blowing with all of the fallout from the plant. They did not have 20 million doses. And so you will see, within 5 to 10 years, a clear spike in basically cancer or leukemia or other things for the children that were exposed to radiation that came from that power plant. So if you're not familiar with this, I'll just pass these around. I'm pretty sure you guys sell it here. Yeah, they do, KI. 1 packet would be enough for 1 person for about 12 days is the usual dosage. It's not so much for somebody of my age. So you're not concerned, I'm 60s, so for me it doesn't matter because I'd see cancer 10, 15 years, doesn't matter. It is very important for pregnant women and small children that are growing up to about age 8, 10, where cells are rapidly changing. And that's what you want to protect. Those are the key. Over a certain age, 35, 40, certainly 50s and 60s, you would not waste a dose on them. You would save it for children. And they come with the dosing instructions because an adult takes about 130 milligrams, a child might take half of that, a really small child might take half of half. So you just have to look and follow the dosing instructions that are there. But KI is important because when you need it, it won't be available, guaranteed. The supply was completely stripped out after Fukushima for about 3 to 4 months. You couldn't get it at any price anywhere. So it's just one of those. That's one of the ladies who was at the other class. See if she wants to come in. Did you already talk to her? Because I have something I want to tell her. She was interested in a product that I had. So if she's still here, I'm pretty sure that was her. Okay. The term we use in emergency management is called all hazards. And so that's really what we're doing is we're preparing for all hazards. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to occur. So we prepare for all of the different things that are potentially out there. In that way, we can protect the largest number of people. So we don't just say, well, I'm just going to prepare for a snowstorm or a power outage. You want to take a broader brush and look at it and say, I'm going to provide protection for, or take a look at a lot of things. I assume you're familiar with KI, so yeah. Okay. Okay, the only real definitions you can come up with or find is that shelter in place is a term been used for many, many years by emergency management and law enforcement. Law enforcement has adopted it recently due to active shooters. It generally means we have an event occurring that's usually short term. we have an active shooter at the school, at the mall, at the wherever. We need you to go inside, lock yourself down, and stay put until the police come and they neutralize that. That's usually the term what shelter in place is. It's used by emergency management on the other side when we have like a hazmat and we want people to go inside and shelter in place is what we want them to do. The bug-in usually is a similar type thing, but it's for a longer period of time, where you decide for whatever reason there are hazards that are out there that you're not going to go out. Instead, you're going to stay home and you're going to set up your shelter and protect yourself and your family, and that's really what you're going to do. Okay. Some of the general requirements, basically the most important, close the doors, lock the doors, windows, turn off your heating ventilating system so that you're not bringing bad air from the outside in, and kind of protect your house as much you can if there's some type of a hazmat or there's something occurring out there that you don't want to get into your house. You'll have an emergency supply kit, and then turn on your local radio. On your AM stations, you listen to AM 590 KSUB. If you had your police scanner, whatever city you live in or the county, you'd listen to the sheriff's department just to figure out what's going on out there, so you had some idea. If you had a hazmat involved, they might ask you to seal your windows and doors. If you had something, for example, a cloud that was coming downwind. And these type of things work well. These are typically used in a house that's not very well insulated, just very, very inexpensive. They are just some type of polyethylene of some gauge that you're using, that you're putting over your doors and windows where you're worried about outside air coming into your house. I worked at the Nevada test site and after post 9/11, and we did tests on this stuff. And actually this with just regular ordinary duct tape worked unbelievably well. We were very surprised at how well it protected from basically hazardous materials in a gas or a vapor from coming in. It worked well just to seal your doors and windows by using something as simple as some type of plastic like this. In lieu of not having anything, garbage bags work. Put the garbage bag open, it's bigger, and you're sealing it. Basically, you tape it at the top and the bottom, and then you seal the edges. And it works really well for a short term. Is it going to work for the rest of your life? No, probably not. But it'll work for 8, 10, 12 hours, depending on the quality of the duct tape and how strong the chemical agent was that we used. But it was an effective protection. So we would suggest that you at least have something available, or you're at least aware of it if some chemical has been released and they say we recommend you shelter in place and try to close up your windows and doors and things like that because the plume or the cloud is coming your way. Then you probably want to do something. Okay, duct tape does work, so just monitor your radio and listen to whatever instructions they're providing. Local authorities may not immediately know how long it's going to be because they may have a hazmat incident that occurred on the interstate. A tanker has tipped over and it's releasing product, and that product is continuously coming out. Hazmat teams take quite a while to get to the scene, assess what's going on, and then to be able to take effective action. So it may be 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, depending on what's being released. So you need to be prepared. You just listen to your radio, TV if the power's on. You're watching TV, the internet. But you may be there for a little bit. Okay, these are some of the basic shelter supplies, and we'll talk about each one of those, is what you might want to have in there. Okay, communications is very important, and you need to have communications so that you're listening to the radio or monitoring the internet or using these type of radios. That we kind of already mentioned. These are Chinese radios, and they go from 35, 45 up to quite a bit more, depending on what you want to spend. They allow you to monitor your local police, fire, sheriff, and they allow you to communicate within your little group, and they'll go a couple of miles. So if you have neighbors that you're working with, you're able to talk to them, say, hey, are you okay over there? Is everything fine? Did you guys get the message? This, and this. We use in our neighborhood, I'm a CERT coordinator, and so an instructor, and we use them on our CERT teams. So we can communicate to our CERT members to say, hey, this is going on, or we have a fire over here, or whatever the thing is. So we have our own little network set up with these, and they work fairly well. So we would recommend some type of communications. If you're looking at something, Mark is going to have some for sale here shortly that will be programmed with the local frequencies, so you'll be able to hear the sheriff's department, the police. Can you talk to them? No, you can't talk to them. But you can listen to them, which is very good to figure out what's going on out there, which is what you want to do, be able to hear that type of stuff. So that's important. But these are good. They have fairly good. I'm going to leave this on just for a second, and you'll have Cedar City PD come up talking to dispatch, and you just get the quality of the audio. You should be able to do that. And you can figure out their codes fairly quick if you listen to them. If you just turn it on only in an emergency, you'll take you a little while to figure out what's going on. If you listen to it on occasion, you'll have a better idea. Question, go ahead.
I went in and printed all that off for my wife and my kids. I have communication book. So I have all the 10 codes. I have all the medical codes, so that for somebody who doesn't,
right, they can, and that's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea to have that.
Don't have to worry about.
Do they understand it?
Do they understand?
Yeah, no, that's good. And just knowing who's who when they say, 1W15, whoever it is, and you can go, I wonder who that is. Okay, Sheriff's Department unit, 3W30, Cedar City, different things like that. So it would give them an idea to have some of that stuff, and that's kind of part of your plan. Within your plan, you might have something that just says communications plan, communications annex, and it talks about using these radios. Turn radio on. The good thing is they're lithium batteries. They hold the charge really well now, and they last a good long period of time. Easy to charge, fairly inexpensive. So we would suggest something that you look at and say, is there a neighbor that I want to talk to? Is there somebody else in my little group that I'm working with that would be helpful? Or if I had to send somebody outside, would it be helpful to be able to talk to them? So just having basic communications, inexpensive, that works even if you don't have any power. These little toys still work, and they do a good job. So you want to make sure that you've got communications. Your cell phone may or may not work, to be perfectly honest with you. If the towers go down, it may or may not work. You definitely want to have water, your sealed water. So you have water bottles or water containers that have water. Food, usually high energy food. Most people will think power bars, things like that, because you may not want to do cooking. A lot of people are, when things go wrong, they're edgy, they're not sure, and so using power bars or things like that. First aid kit, fire extinguisher, anything like that that you want to have. And then, of course, a bag if you have to evacuate to be able to do that. Put it in a bag and go. 2 gallons per day is what's suggested per person. If you have pets, then you're going to want to have more to make sure you cover the pets and then food for them. You can minimize water by using baby wipes and then bath wipes, and I make recommendations on those for lots of different things. If folks who have never seen these are really developed. Nursing homes and places like this use them, where you have a patient that you're not going to take out of its bed, but you need to clean the patient, to do daily patient cleaning. And these work well. They go for a couple of dollars. They're generally available in some variation at Walmart. You can get them there. And what they are is, everybody knows what a baby wipe is. These are big baby wipes. So a baby wipe is like, 4x4, 6x6. These might be 8x8, 10x10, 12x12, just depends. And they can be, you can add extra. They come pre-moistened, and they have a soap on them that doesn't have to be rinsed off. So if you're not familiar with them, this is what we would recommend, because you're probably going to want to limit the amount of water, because you may have limited amount of water, especially if you've lost power. The pumps probably won't be working. And then you just use sanitizing a gel afterwards. Basically, don't normally sanitize your, but everybody has that. You buy it at the dollar store for $1. After you use the restroom, you can sanitize, clean your hands. So you may have, if you're considering a long-term event, then you would fill up your larger containers before the event, your 5-gallon, 55-gallon, whatever amount you want. The food is just, most of it's high energy type food. You may use the freeze-dried foods. I'll show you some of that in a little bit, but that may be a potential for longer terms to use some of the freeze-dried products. Communications. If you're going to use your cell phone, you have a much higher probability of communicating with the person at the other end if you text them. The cell system is designed on how much bandwidth is out there. The voice uses a lot of bandwidth. If you text them, you have much higher probability of actually getting through. So make sure you know how to text. The person that you're texting to knows how to text back. A lot of times the response is just K, meaning everything is okay, I'm fine. You know, you would text your wife, your husband, whatever it is, I am in town, the interstate is blocked, I'm over here, I'm fine, no issues. You know, that maybe that's all you need to do. And then listen to your radio, TV, whatever internet you consider reliable to do that. But it's very, very important that you are able to communicate to your loved ones, otherwise they get worried and they say, well, maybe we should go look for them, maybe we should go do this, and you don't want them when you're already safe. So you need some way to communicate with them. Worst case is you're using some type of a small two-way radio, especially if you're in town. These would work all over town, and the cell phones go down, and you just need to be able to talk to them and say, I'm coming home, I'll be there in 15 minutes, wherever it is. So just some means of communication is very, very important. Sanitation, when you shelter in your house, usually you have a bathroom there. If you're sheltering somewhere else that doesn't have one, you want to make sure that you have some way, even for short term, to set up. It could be like a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket with a lid on it, possibly some kitty litter in there. Use baby wipes, hand sanitizer, disinfecting spray, things like that you're going to want to basically to keep something clean. Obviously, you're going to want a larger amount if you're planning on doing that for long term, but just a short term. Sheltering with pets, most important thing is if you're going to pull that pet inside, you have to have a place for that pet to relieve itself, because it's going to continue to try to scratch at the door. It's not going to understand, especially if you have some type of a cloud or a plume that's coming over you. So you have to figure out, what am I going to do with this pet that I have? I have a dog, like I have 2 fairly large dogs, and they will not like to be inside for that period of time at all. So I have to have something to take care of them, because if you let them outside, what's going to happen? Potentially they get contaminated, and you have to decontaminate them before you bring them back in. That's where you could use something as simple as this to wipe off their paws, things like that, wipe off their coat, but you've added the potential for them to bring contaminants back inside. So you have to be careful with that, consider the risk. These are some of the personal protective equipment supplies that we recommend. Now, if you took the PPE class, you know the difference between N95s and other masks, okay? So I'll just pass some of these around just to give you some idea. 2 different types. This is this pink one, and they come all different colors. This is just a dust mask, sometimes called a patient mask, sometimes called a procedures mask. This is not an N95. How do you tell the difference? An N95 will always say NIOSH N95 on it. So these, fairly cheap, Harbor Freight, you get like 50 of them for like $5 for dust, things like that. These generally you can buy them in boxes of 20 for $20, 18 bucks, 25 bucks, depending on the quality of it. So these are about $1 a piece. These are like 10 cents a piece. So these filter down to 0.03 microns, so they do a very, very good job of filtering particulates in the air. They are not effective for gases. So if somebody says, oh, there's been a release of chlorine gas, you can't say, well, I'm going to put my mask on, I'm going to walk outside, I'll be fine. No, you'll be dead just like everybody else. So these are not good for gases, particulates, and biological type things. Flu, tuberculosis, I wouldn't wear it for Ebola, but I'll just pass these around so everybody can see the difference between basically dust masks and N95s. And the N95s can come in a variety of types. So this is something that's maybe easier to carry. Like when I travel, I carry those in my briefcase because they're nice and flat. And again, they run about $1 a piece when you usually buy them in boxes of 20 or so. So yes, ma'am.
How long can you wear an N95 and still have it?
You can wear it until it becomes contaminated. In a hospital environment, it would be a single shift, and sometimes it's a single patient, where you're going into a patient's room, patient has TB, and you wear the mask, you go in, you see the patient, you come out, they either dispose of the mask, you hang it up for the shift, and at the end of your shift, you get rid of it. What will happen is those masks, and I'll show you the difference on these, is they become soiled. Just basically, when you exhale, you have water vapor when you exhale, and they become soiled with it. These have an exhalation valve on them, so they protect for a longer period of time. Generally, these are more expensive than the standard ones. So these are $1.50, $2 a piece. So I buy a box of 10 for $20 on these. So if the intent is to wear this for a longer period of time, not short term, get the ones with the exhalation valves, but they cost more. So that's the trade-off there between the two. Because the normal one does not have an exhalation valve, and it's meant for typically a short-term use is what they do. So N95s, dust mask, you have your basic nitrile medical gloves, that you would buy at Walmart or Walgreens or whatever. Don't recommend latex because there are people with unknown latex allergies. So be very careful with latex because it basically, it's almost like it accumulates. And it could be fine, say, well, I don't have any allergy, and all of a sudden use latex gloves on them and boom, they get a reaction out of it, not good. You won't get that with a standard nitrile, so spend the extra 50 cents to get the nitrile gloves. That's what you want to do. You also may want some heavier gloves if you're dealing with stuff. These are the heavier nitrile. These are usually referred to as pesticide gloves, solvent gloves. These are, Home Depot, $2, give or take. If you're dealing with lots of bloodborne pathogens or something that's actually hazardous, you want these type of gloves. Much, much better. Your baby wipes, like we've suggested, and these things work well too as baby wipes. Just always make sure that it says safe for skin. For example, I had somebody recommend and say, oh, these would work great because they have Clorox on them. Okay, this is not good for skin. If I have a suit on or something like this and I'm wiping this off, great. If I'm wiping my skin off, not so good. Bleach in skin is like, don't do that. That's not good. Bleach should not go on skin. So if it says, heavy duty and it shows pictures of your toilet or something like this, that's not good. You want to make sure that it says skin safe or something like that. Okay, for skin, obviously baby wipes are good, but not the things for that aren't skin safe. So be careful with that. So these, I'll just show you, these are the really inexpensive, and we'll talk about this in the bio type stuff. This is not a full coverall. This is generally used by nursing personnel in a hospital where they're treating a patient. For some reason, the patient has something that's coming out. It might be TB, that you would not use this for Ebola. This would not be a good idea. This is something that is infectious, but it won't kill you. So they would put this on. This is a large, which isn't my size, but this would fit like my wife and stuff. But it is a somewhat of a water repellent type gown. They come in packs of 10. Generally, they're referred to as isolation gowns, and they can be had for about $1 a piece or something. So, for example, you're at home in a shelter-in-place in a bio environment, and your husband, your wife, your kid is sick, and they're coughing up things, and you want to contain that. So you go in and you're giving them food, Pedialyte, whatever you're doing, and you don't want to get it on your clothing, and so this would work fine as an isolation gown. The hazard is not behind you, the hazard is in front of you. You'd have an N95, you had your double gloves, maybe even a little mask or something, and you're protecting yourself. And these work well. They are considered disposable. In a hospital, they're one-time, one-patient use. At home, if you're treating the same patient, you may be able to take it off, hang it up, and wear it, for the noon meal, if you will. We will get into some of these other ones, which are more enclosed type suits, provide better protection for different things. I have one that would be an Ebola type of suit that I'll show you. Again, they're $10 or so a piece. The key is that you have to have the stuff available before the event occurs. Because, for example, during the Ebola crisis, the suits, these type of suits, which generally go $10 to $15 is an average, a single price that you can get these suits for. Very water repellent, enclosed suit, work really well for biohazards, even light chem. You could use this for. Rad would work. During the Ebola event that occurred 18 months, two years ago, the price of these soared to about $50 a piece, if you could even find them. So it went from $12, $15, which is the stock price, to you can buy them individually, and the prices soared. So if you are concerned about something, you need to get it beforehand. Just put it away. There's really no shelf life as long as you're not putting this in a shed that gets to 150 degrees. If you're just storing this in your house with your food and you have a box and you have a bunch of them, they're fine. It has an indefinite life, if you will. They do dry rot probably after 30 years, but don't worry about it at that point. Okay? So these type of things you may want to consider. The other thing is, do they make better masks than an N95? Sure. And they have products here that they make. They have military type masks that take different types of screw-on filters. And these are true protective masks. These will protect you against vapors or gases. So if you're concerned about, I have a facility that manufactures chlorine or whatever, and you're concerned about something, you may want to have something that protects you against gases. And then make sure that you get, sealed canisters that come either in what looks like aluminum foil, or they come in a little coffee can type of thing. They have an Israeli version here, which are good, and then they have another version, another military version here. And they run anywhere from 35, 40, up to hundreds of dollars. So the thing on that is you should get training on these so that you know how to use them, because they don't come with any training. Most of these masks are sold to actually military or police departments. Then they bring an instructor in. That's like we go in and we teach. That's what I did for years and years, is teach how to use those things. And so we could do that. We have done it at some of our other classes, teach people how to use that stuff. Okay. Different types of PPE. Won't really get into too much of it. There's two components: respiratory protection and then your suit. And they should work together. So if you're concerned about gases, you really need to have a mask that protects you against a gas. If you're not concerned, if you say, well, I'm only concerned about a bio, like TB or something like that, then you could go with an N95. An N95 also works for RAD. But if you're concerned about a gas or something, you need to have a real one. And then a protective garment. And they go from very expensive to inexpensive, like this. You're treating your son, your daughter, your husband, whatever, because they have caught some pandemic flu, if you will, and you're treating them. Okay. Basic decon. Wet decon is, if you can, you're getting that person in a shower, and we suggest as a solution just baby shampoo, because it works really well to decontaminate. Doesn't matter what it is, rad, chem, bio. Use baby shampoo and water, and you get it off of them. It's a warm water, not hot water, not cold water, just a warm water, and use that. If you can't get the person to the showers aren't working, that's when you're using these type of things, these big baby wipes, if you will, the 12 by 12 ones, to especially around the respiratory tract, to get that clear as much as possible. That's the most important. You don't want them to inhale whatever product is out there. So you want to get it off their skin. If they have something on their skin, get it off their skin as quickly as possible. Dry decon is basically you're removing the outermost clothing. In an event that occurs where you're caught outside and you have to come in, you have to remove the outermost clothing. You would essentially disrobe outside, put the stuff in a bag outside the house, go inside, try to take a warm, soapy shower. The water's not working, that's when you use the baby wipes, especially your face, things like that. Get whatever it is. It might be a dust, it might be a vapor, it could be anything. You're just trying to get it off of you as quickly as possible. Okay? And then you basically put it in some type of a bag that you'll take care of later. Defensive issues. That's not what I normally teach, so I let Scott do that. That's his. I would assume he's going to either have a class or has done a class on defensive issues in your neighborhood. Coming. That's what I figure is there are variations of that. I was going to talk about him on that as to what he's going to do, so I'll just mention that. I give you a couple of things to consider in a long-term event where you might want to be concerned about problems. Is the power grid still up? Are stores still open? Are people going to work? And are government agencies responding? So if you call 911, will the Sheriff's Department come out? Will the EMS come out? Will the Fire Department come out? If you're answering no to two or more of those questions, you may have a situation where you want to consider, how am I going to protect myself? Because the sheriff isn't going to come out, and the power is off, and they're not selling anything because Smith's is closed, Walmart is not open, things like that. So if these are good ways, some call them triggers, to look and say, what's really going on here. It's more than what the news media is saying, that everything is okay, all is well, don't worry about anything. You know, we've already kind of addressed, does the news media ever lie to you? No, that would never happen. But you need to kind of make your own assessment and figure out what's going on out there. And if you start to see a couple of things going, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right. And especially if you have a radio and you were listening and the sheriff's department has no traffic at all, or the dispatcher is frantically trying to find someone to make a response to shots fired at, you know, Walmart or some apartment building or whatever it is, and no one is responding, that's a bad indicator. That says the police department is not responding, the deputies are staying home, whatever it is, they're not available. That's a bad indicator. The news media is never going to tell you that. You're only going to know when you hear the dispatcher repeatedly call, do I have any calls available for a shots fired call, for trespassers on this farm? And nobody responds. That's a bad sign right there. Okay, so you may want to consider to have a plan for, how am I going to protect my little farm, ranch, household, wherever I am? How am I going to work with my neighbors to do that? That kind of needs to be discussed beforehand, as to how would I work with my neighbors to protect my little cul-de-sac, whatever you have. But that needs to be talked about kind of beforehand. Okay, shelter evacuation, you may have to evacuate your shelter. You may have to get all your stuff together. The cloud is coming your way, whatever it is. Have a bag, make sure you can get out of your shelter if you need to be. These are the things you bring. Always bring your, if you are on daily medication, bring that with you. Specific events, and these are, we'll kind of talk about that. I think what I'll do, it's almost 2 o'clock. Let's take a quick break, and we can do that.